Getting started with creating tables in SQL Data Warehouse is pretty simple. The create table syntax follows the common syntax that you're probably used to from working with other database systems. So to create a table, you simply need to name the table, name your columns, and define data types for each column. We have a new feature in SQL DW called CTAS, which stands for Create Table as Select. And this is a fully parallel and minimally logged operation that creates a new table based on the output of a select statement. This is the fastest way that you can create a copy of a table. And you can kind of think of this as a supercharged version of select into. We also have a new attribute in SQL Data Warehouse called a distribution column. Because SQL DW is a distributed database, we need a way to distribute data across the multiple Azure SQL databases or distributions. And so the distribution column is the column that determines how we do these distributions or divide the data behind the scenes. We'll talk more about these in detail in our next module. One important thing to note with SQL Data Warehouse is that you get a clustered column store index on a table that you create by default if you don't specify any other type of index. Also noteworthy in SQL DW is that you don't get statistics automatically created or updated for you. So after you create a table, it's important that you manually create and maintain statistics. And another concept regarding tables in SQL DW are external tables. So an external table is a metadata object that gets created within SQL DW that references data that's stored outside of SQL Data Warehouse. And it allows you to query that external data. We've talked a little bit about how data gets divided across underlying databases in Azure SQL Data Warehouse, and these databases are called distributions. We get 60 of these underlying databases. And we're talking about it in the context of tables because you have to specify a distribution option when you create a table. So let's talk about how to visualize this. If you look at the diagram on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, we have 60 buckets. And you can think of each of these buckets as one of your Azure SQL databases or distributions. When you create a table using the syntax on the left side of the screen, what we have there is a traditional create table statement with 3 columns defined with their data types. And then we have a with clause that specifies we're explicitly creating a clustered column store index. And then we're also specifying our distribution method. So the distribution method that we're specifying is called hash, and we're specifying a column ID. And we will talk more about what that means in our next module. Final word before we end our overview on tables. Table design is very important in Azure SQL Database. The indexes and distributions, the partitions, the data types, the load process, et cetera, that you select, they're going to define the types of queries that your warehouse will support running quickly. And you want to consider some of the questions on this slide in order to make good design choices about your table design. So think about things like, what's my data like? What are the types of queries that I'm running? How big is the table that I'm going to be creating? How often is data refreshed? Do I have fact tables or dimension tables? And then what types of columns are used for query joins? And there's a lot more to consider, but these are some questions to get you started.